Deadlines are important, but people are irreplaceable. My name is Tom Edwards. I'm 52 years old, and for the past 25 years, I've been the senior project coordinator at Northgate Developments, a construction firm you've probably driven past a dozen times without realizing the scale of what we do. Schools, bridges, community centers, I've shepherded them all from blueprint to ribbon cutting. I'm the guy who knows the names of every subcontractor, the quirks of every site foreman, and exactly how to keep a million moving parts on schedule. My colleagues joke that I keep the entire project timeline in my head, and the truth is, they're not wrong. I never thought I'd see the day when the very loyalty and discipline I'd given this company would be thrown back at me like a cheap tool tossed into a dumpster. But that's exactly what happened. And it happened at the worst possible time, the week my father passed away. I told my manager, Carl, exactly a week before the funeral that I would need a few days of paid leave. It wasn't an unreasonable request. In fact, the leave calendar had already been signed off by HR months ago. Carl's reaction? A tight smile and a muttered, "Projects don't wait, Tom. The team needs everyone in place." I remember standing there in his office, hands in my pockets, thinking it was just his usual passive-aggressive nonsense. I'd dealt with Carl long enough to know he liked to puff up his authority, but I never thought he'd try to weaponize it like this. The morning of the funeral, I was in my suit, tie knotted tight, standing in the kitchen with a mug of coffee I barely touched. My sister was due to pick me up in half an hour. That's when my phone buzzed, an email notification from HR. The subject line made my stomach drop before I even opened it. Termination notice, unauthorized absence. I read the first sentence 3 times before it sank in. Effective immediately, my contract with Northgate Developments was terminated due to job abandonment. My hands went cold. I sat down at the kitchen table, phone still in my hand, staring at those words as if they were in a foreign language. 15 minutes later, another ping, this time a personal message from Carl. Just one sentence. "You picked the wrong time for family matters." That's when the shock started giving way to something sharper. Anger. Not the explosive kind, but the cold, methodical kind. The kind that makes you start lining up dominoes in your head, planning exactly how they're going to fall. Here's the thing Carl hadn't thought about. In construction, certain documents are like keys to a vault. Without them, the money doesn't move. And in our case, there was one in particular. The final delivery certificate for a municipal bridge project. Without my signature on it, the city wouldn't release the second payment to Northgate, a payment worth over $1 million. That certificate, it was sitting in my home office safe. I didn't rush to act. I went to my father's funeral, stood graveside with my family, and gave the man who taught me integrity the send-off he deserved. But all the while, in the back of my mind, the plan was forming. That evening, I powered up my laptop and started laying the groundwork. First, I took screenshots of the HR email and Carl's message. Then I called Jenna from payroll, an old friend, and asked her to quietly send me a copy of the approved leave calendar. She did, without asking too many questions. It showed my funeral leave clearly marked and signed off. Next, I reached out to Mike Reynolds, the city's chief project officer, and a man I'd worked with for years. I didn't give him all the details, just enough. "Mike, there's been a situation. I'm holding the final delivery certificate, and I won't be releasing it until a certain personnel matter is resolved." Mike wasn't happy, but he understood the leverage. Then came the union. I called Denise, our union rep, and walked her through what happened. She didn't even let me finish before saying, "That's illegal, Tom. They can't terminate you for taking approved leave. I'll file a grievance first thing tomorrow." By the time I shut down my laptop that night, I had the beginnings of a pressure campaign. Carl thought he could pull the rug out from under me, but he was about to find out I'd built that rug myself and nailed it to the floor. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls from Carl, No voicemails, just calls. I ignored them. An hour later, a text. Let's meet. We can fix this. That was followed by another. If you care about the team, you'll sign that certificate. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my attorney, Sandra Lee, a woman whose polite tone often masked a predatory legal mind. I forwarded her every piece of evidence, the emails, the calendar, the messages. She read them and said, "You've got them boxed in. Now we wait for them to realize it." Waiting, though, wasn't exactly my style. That afternoon, I heard from a foreman on the bridge project that Carl had been asking around about when I planned to drop off the paperwork. The man sounded nervous, like he didn't want to be caught in the middle. I reassured him, "Don't worry, this isn't your fight." But inside, I was smiling. Carl was sweating. And then came the rumor, one of those whispers that moves through the construction world faster than concrete sets. Word was that Carl had already taken an expedite fee from one of the subcontractors, expecting me to sign off on their inflated invoice without looking too closely. Without my signature, that money stayed in limbo, and the subcontractor wasn't happy. It was all starting to unravel, and I wasn't even halfway through pulling the thread. I didn't have to wait long for the first crack to show. Mike Reynolds called me from a conference room at City Hall, voice low, like someone could be listening. "Tom, I've just frozen the second payment. Accounting won't release a cent without your signature, and we're formally requesting a statement from Northgate explaining why the project coordinator is suddenly unavailable." "Good," I said. "Make sure that request goes to the board, not just to operations." He exhaled. "You and I both know who's going to take this personally." "I'm not interested in personal," I said. "I'm interested in policy." After we hung up, I stared at the frame picture above my desk, Dad and me on a half-finished deck, both of us in tool belts, both of us grinning like idiots. He used to say, "Measure twice, cut once, and if the guy in charge tells you to skip the second measurement, he isn't in charge." I could almost hear him chuckle. "Proud of you, kid." By mid-afternoon, Denise pinged me. The grievance was filed. She had also sent a notice to Northgate that any attempt to coerce me into signing documents while illegally terminated would be considered retaliation. "They'll try to sweet-talk you," she said. "Then they'll try to scare you. They always do it in that order." She wasn't wrong. 30 minutes later, HR patched me into a video call with two faces I knew and one I didn't. The HR director wore her most professional concern. "Tom, let's not escalate this. We can offer a severance package, extend your benefits for 90 days, and mark your departure as voluntary. That way you preserve your reputation, and the company avoids unpleasantness." "My reputation," I said, "isn't a line item you can bargain with. Reinstate me, pay my lost wages, and we're done." The third face, the lawyer, leaned forward. "You're in possession of company property." "I'm in possession of a document I prepared as an officer of the project. My signature is my liability. You don't get that until this is legal." He didn't like that, and it showed. The HR director tried again. "Think of the team, Tom." "I am," I said, "every day." That evening, I got the message that told me we were out of small talk. "Carl, no punctuation, no capitalization, no filters. Sign the act, Tom. Don't make this worse." I put my phone down and went to wash the dinner dishes. The hot water steamed my glasses, and for the first time in days, I let myself breathe slowly, on purpose. You can't steer a crane with a shaking hand. Same applies here. The next day, the city's procurement officer sent a formal letter to Northgate's board. I saw a copy because Mike made sure I did. It said, in polite municipal language, that the city had concerns about governance irregularities and that future bids might be evaluated with those concerns in mind. In our business, that's not a slap on the wrist. That's a red tag on your entire pipeline. By lunch, my phone was lighting up with messages from the site. One of the inspectors refused to do the final pass without me present. The paving subcontractor threatened to pull 2 crews to another job if payment timelines shifted. and a rumor was making rounds that the mayor's office wanted answers on why a headline project was stalling over paperwork. A text from Jenna, braver than most, landed like a small gift. Boards called an emergency session at 4. Someone told them about the expedite fee. Be ready to talk. The expedite fee was the thread I hoped would show. A few months back, a subcontractor had started showing up in my inbox with surprisingly clean invoices for a company notorious for change orders and last-minute discovery extras. I flagged it then and kept a folder, not because I had proof, but because I know a fingerprint when I see one. The math was too neat. The timing was too perfect. When Denise told me to gather pressure, that was the first folder I handed to my attorney with a note. Ask who approved these without dual sign-off. At 3:58, I was staring at myself in the black square of a video preview, tie crooked, jaw tight. At 4, my screen filled with faces. 2 board members I respected, one who barely remembered my name, the CFO with the polite smile that could sell you a bridge you already own. And, to my mild surprise, Carl. He looked like he hadn't slept. The chairwoman, a former transportation commissioner, took point. Mr. Edwards, thank you for joining us. We'll be brief. Can you explain, in your own words, the events of the last week? I did, calmly, precisely, no embellishment. Approved leave. HR termination email. Carl's message. Policy language requiring 3 written warnings and a committee review. The final delivery certificate in my custody as project coordinator, and my unwillingness to sign while illegally terminated. Carl broke in, voice rising. He's holding the company hostage. He's doing this on purpose. I didn't look at him. I'm protecting the client, the project, and this company from a set of shortcuts that should never have been taken. The CFO tried to moderate. Let's not ascribe motives. The chairwoman held up a hand. There's also the matter of subcontractor billing. Mr. Edwards, what do you know? I kept my answer narrow. I noticed a pattern of approvals that skipped second sign-off. I don't approve those. I flag the invoices. That's all. The CFO cleared his throat. For the record, those approvals came from operations. She turned to Carl. Operations? Carl swallowed. We needed to keep momentum. If we stopped to sign every little thing... It's not a little thing, I said. It's controls. He snapped. You're not a hero, Tom. You're a bottleneck. I let the silence do the work for me. In political rooms, silence is sometimes the loudest testimony. The chairwoman nodded slowly. Mr. Edwards, if we restore you pending review, will you complete the certification in good faith? Yes, I said. Once my status is legal and the client has a formal apology for the disruption. The CFO winced. An apology implies fault. It confirms respect, I said, and the city knows the difference. They muted us and went into executive session. On my screen, the checkerboard faces vanished, replaced by my own reflection again. I loosened my tie and stared at the tiny groove it had left in my neck. In that tight little half moon, I saw a month's worth of lost sleep, a funeral lived on autopilot, and a line I could either step over or defend. Some fights you don't pick, they pick you. When they came back, the chairwoman spoke with the finality of a gavel. Mr. Edwards, the board is suspending Mr. Carlson pending an independent audit. Your termination is reversed, effective immediately, with full back pay for the week in question. HR will issue a written apology to you and to the client. You will supervise the final handover and the certification. After that, we'll review your recommendations on operations controls. She paused, eyes softening for a beat. And Mr. Edwards, our condolences on your loss. We should have been better than this. I thanked them simply. Carl Square stayed silent. The CFO said they'd follow up in writing. The meeting ended. I sat there for a long minute, the room suddenly very quiet, the late light slanting across my desk. Then I called Mike. It's happening, I said. You'll get the certificate tomorrow morning, and a written apology." He didn't cheer or gloat. He just sighed, a good relieved sound. "I knew you'd land it upright." "Me too," I said, surprising myself by believing it. That night, my sister came over with our mother's pot roast recipe, the one we'd both pretended we didn't care about until the smell filled the house. We ate at my kitchen table, 3 plates, 2 candles, 1 silence that wasn't empty. When they left, I washed the dishes and opened the safe. The certificate looked exactly how it should, clean, precise, final. My nameline felt heavier than ink. I slept well for the first time in a week. In the morning, I put on a clean shirt, drove to City Hall, and met Mike in his office, where the walls were still half bare from a recent remodel. He watched me sign, then added his own signature with a mechanical pencil he'd used since the first job we'd done together. He scanned the page, initialed the bottom, and shook my hand. "Payment goes out by EOD." On the way out, I ran into 2 site inspectors gossiping by the elevator. They went quiet when they saw me. Then one said, "Heard you put the brakes on a runaway truck." I smiled. "Just fix the brakes." Back at my truck, I scrolled through the unopened messages that had stacked up. HR's formal letter. The union's note of congratulations. A short text from Jenna that just said, "Thank you." And 3 unread messages from Carl, now somehow more desperate and less coherent than before. I moved them into a folder I named in my head, and never out loud. Not to gloat, just to remember where the line had been and why I hadn't crossed it. By late afternoon, accounting at Northgate confirmed the city's payment landed. The CFO sent me a bland message about stability restored. I replied with a single sentence. "The project's done when the people are respected." 2 days later, the board announced an internal investigation into operations approvals and subcontractor billing. Word around the job trailers was that the expedite fee wasn't an isolated event. My phone buzzed with questions I didn't answer. That wasn't my job anymore. My job was to finish clean and set the next crew up to start better. When the ribbon cutting finally came, the mayor mispronounced my last name and grinned like it didn't matter. Cameras clicked. Kids from a nearby school waved tiny flags. It was a good day. I stood in the back with Mike and watched the crowd cross the new span under a sky that had finally decided to be blue again. "Think you'll take a vacation now?" he asked. "I just had one," I said, and we both laughed at the worst joke I've ever told. On Monday, Northgate's president called me into his office, closed the door, and said, "Pick your next team. Any 5 people you want. We'll fund what you need." "Make it 7, I said. "We'll do it right or not at all." He nodded the way a man nods when he knows he owes you more than he can say. That night, I archived the messages from the past week, labeling the folder on instinct, and then leaving it alone. I don't erase history, even when it hurts. It's how you keep the foundation honest. Dad would have liked that. And for the first time since the cemetery, I said it out loud, just to the empty room. Deadlines don't mourn. People do. Then I added the part I wish I had learned sooner. And the work isn't worth a thing if you forget which one matters most. 2 weeks later, the audit results began to leak, first in whispers from procurement, then in emails that seemed to accidentally copy the wrong people. The pattern was worse than I'd thought. It wasn't just one subcontractor or a few invoices. The report listed multiple instances of approvals without secondary sign-off, each tied to Carl's login. The total overcharges topped 7 figures. The board held another closed session, but this time I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be. By evening, the company's internal news feed posted a terse statement. Effective immediately, Carl Carlson has been relieved of his duties. Northgate Developments will cooperate fully with any external inquiries. Our commitment to compliance remains paramount. No thank you, no credit, no public mention of how the dam had actually held. That was fine. I wasn't in it for the applause. Still, I couldn't ignore the shift in how people treated me. Site supervisors who used to just nod in passing now lingered to talk. Junior engineers asked for advice on procurement checks. Even HR of all departments forwarded me updated policy drafts for feedback. One Friday afternoon, Jenna stopped by my office. She closed the door behind her, an uncharacteristic move for someone who hated closed spaces. "You know," she said, "before all this, people figured you were just meticulous. Like a guy who'd rather double-check a concrete pour than trust the foreman's word. Now they see you as someone who'll actually put himself between them and a bad call." I lean back in my chair. "Meticulous is just what they call you before they need you." She smiled, a little sad. "Don't let them forget it." That weekend, I drove out to the river where Dad used to take me fishing. The old wooden dock was gone, replaced by a steel and composite platform. One of ours, in fact. Standing there, I thought about how many spans, schools, and bridges I'd worked on, and how few of them I'd ever stood under once the ribbon was cut. The phone in my pocket buzzed. It was my sister. "Hey," she said, "you left some stuff at Mom's." A box of old work boots and a notebook. I knew the one, Dad's project log from the year we built the deck. Every page covered in neat block letters, each measurement double underlined. On the inside cover, he'd scrawled, "If it's worth building, it's worth protecting." Monday came with another curveball. The president of Northgate called me into a meeting with 2 senior VPs and the chairwoman from the board. I expected a new project briefing. Instead, she slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposal for a project integrity office, a small, autonomous unit tasked with reviewing major contracts, certifying deliveries, and reporting directly to the board. My name was typed neatly in the director slot. "This isn't a promotion," she said. "It's a safeguard. You've proven you can keep us honest when it matters. Now, we want you to make it matter all the time." I turned the page, scanning the budget lines. Enough for a 4-person team, plus outside consultants when needed. A dotted line relationship with procurement and legal. And, most surprising, a clause giving the office authority to pause any project pending review. "You realize," I said, "this means I'll be stepping on a lot of toes." "That's the point," the president replied. I signed the acceptance before I left the room. The first hire I made was Denise from the union. She knew contracts better than anyone inside Northgate and didn't flinch at pressure. Next came Jenna, because she already understood the dance between site work and corporate paperwork. 2 more came from the ranks of mid-level project managers, folks who had seen enough to know where the corners get cut. Our first test came quicker than expected. A school expansion in a neighboring county was running ahead of schedule, too far ahead. My team's spot check found that half the steel had been substituted with a cheaper grade. The paper trail was immaculate. The material wasn't. We flagged it, halted the job, and sat through 3 days of phone calls from every direction. Contractors, county officials, even a state senator whose name had been on the groundbreaking plaque. When it was over, the supplier replaced every beam at their own expense. And for the first time, I saw in the eyes of the crew what it looked like when people realized someone had their back. A month later, my inbox pinged with a message from Mike at City Hall. "Heard about the school. Glad to know our bridges aren't the only thing you're keeping upright." I replied with a single line, "Measure twice, cut once." The season rolled on, project by project. My days filled with blueprints, compliance checks, and the occasional late-night call when a site hit a snag. I still kept the funeral messages folder on my phone, not to dwell, just as a compass. Because the truth is, it's easy to lose track of what matters when you're buried in schedules and budgets. Easy to start thinking a deadline is more important than a person's word, or that shaving a corner is harmless if the numbers still balance. But I've been on the other side of that thinking now, and I know better. If you ask me today what I do for a living, I wouldn't say I build projects anymore. I'd say I protect them, sometimes from wind, sometimes from rain, and sometimes from the people who think they own them. And if that means being called meticulous, stubborn, or a bottleneck, so be it.